Hi guys, welcome to SUDEEPVERSE, and I hope you people are all doing good. Now, if I ask you a question, how many of you are reading newspapers regularly? Many of you will find a reason for not reading newspapers. The first reason in that will be that it takes a lot of time and hence I have stopped reading newspapers. The second reason will be my English is not that good, so I'll not be able to understand the complete article and hence I've stopped reading newspapers. The third reason would be, what's the point of reading newspapers? Because to make notes, it takes a lot of time. The fourth reason will be, even after reading the article, I'm not able to recollect the article or recall the article, so what's the point of reading newspapers? So these are the common reasons that I find for students to stop reading newspapers. So in this video, we are going to break all the myths and prove to you that reading newspapers will not take a lot of time. Making notes from the newspaper will not take a lot of time. You don't need to have a very good grip over English to read the articles, and more importantly, you can recall and recollect what you read from newspapers. If you want to know all these things, please make sure that you watch till the end of the video. So in this video, firstly we'll understand why should we read the newspaper, because it is important for you to understand the purpose. The second is we'll understand which newspaper to read, because a lot of students are confused of which newspaper to read for this exam. And thirdly, we are going to understand how to read the articles in the newspaper, which will help us recollect better and write notes smarter. So please make sure that you watch till the end. So the first and the most important question for you to understand is, why should you read the newspaper? Unfortunately, many people have created a narrative that why are you reinventing the wheel when there's a magazine already available? What's the point of reading newspaper? This is a very unfortunate situation, and this is wrong information that is spread among the aspirants community. Reading newspapers regularly is beyond just content. What it means is you're not going to read newspapers just to gather more and more information. Information is anyway available, but you're going to read newspapers consistently because one, it will help you develop good vocabulary and good English language that is helpful for you to write good answers in your mains exam. Second, it is going to teach you how to assimilate and comprehend content. This skill of assimilation and comprehension is when you take a complex issue and when you convert that complex issue into a simpler understanding, that is what is known as assimilation and comprehension. So this skill will be developed if you read newspapers regularly. Thirdly, when you read the newspapers consistently, you will understand how the author who has written the editorial is able to generate different dimensions and bring different perspectives. So, when you read the newspapers regularly, you yourself will develop that skill of generating dimensions and bringing perspectives on any issues. Fourthly, you have to read the newspapers for content, and it is this content that is going to give you the information. Now, purposely, I have written the fourth priority as content because reading newspapers is beyond just content. So, we have understood why should we read the newspaper, and I hope that you people have understood reading newspaper is not just about content, it is beyond content. Now, which newspaper should we read? There is a constant debate that should we read the Hindu or should we read the Indian Express? The first thing I would like to say is, don't be in this confusion, and because you are in this confusion, don't use that confusion as an excuse to stop reading newspaper. Secondly, choose any one newspaper and stick to it. It is okay whichever you choose, but choose a newspaper and stick to it regularly. It is the consistency that matters and not which newspaper you choose. Thirdly, my personal bias is always with the Hindu newspaper. The reason is because I've been reading the newspaper for many years. I've been able to use that information to train my students for the mains exam, and my students have been able to emerge successful and as toppers. So I always suggest the Hindu newspaper, but it is okay if you're able to and comfortable in reading Indian Express. But one problem what happens is, many students are just impressed with Indian Express because they're reading the explained section. But if you take the Indian Express, the consistency of articles that are relevant for UPSC is quite low compared to the Hindu. In Hindu, if you read for 6 months, the amount of articles that you will be exposed to, that is more relevant to your syllabus of UPSC, is quite high compared to Indian Express. That is why I always suggest to read the Hindu. Now, the moment I told you to read the Hindu, it doesn't mean that you go from first page to last page and read the entire newspaper. This is wrong. This is one of the wrong perception that everyone has, and people are using this insecurity to make students not read the newspaper. Because I have heard a narrative where one person tells you have 8 pages in the newspaper, you have to read it for 365 days, that will come up to 2,900 pages. How will you revise so many pages? How will you make notes from so many pages? This is a very, very wrong perception. This is a wrong information being spread to discourage students from reading newspaper. Please don't fall to such misinformation as well as such traps. Okay, then if I say that you don't have to read the newspaper from end to end, then how to go about reading the newspaper? When you take the Hindu newspaper, there is one column called editorial column. In the editorial column, you will have 4 editorials. And then there is a column called text and context. In the text and context, you will have 2 articles. So I am talking about 4 editorials and 2 articles. Out of these 4 editorials and 2 articles, always, on an average, there will just be 2 articles that are important for UPSC exam. On an average, there will be just 2 articles that are important for UPSC exam. Very rarely, there will be 4 articles that are relevant for UPSC exam. But on an average, there are only 2 articles that will be relevant every day. So the next question that comes to our mind is how to read those articles, how to write notes from those articles, how to revise those articles, and how much time should we spend on those articles. I will address all these issues, but before that, try and understand the importance of just reading 2 articles every day. 2 articles every day means you are learning about 2 issues every day. If you learn 2 issues every day, for the next 6 months, you are going to be exposed to 360 issues. Even if you remove all the Sundays where you are not going to read the newspapers, even then you will be covering 330 issues. Imagine in 6 months, if you know 330 issues, you already have a firm grip on current affairs and you already are in a much better pedestal compared to all the others who are dependent on magazines where they are going to take the magazine and try to read all the 300 issues at one go. Hence, please make sure that you read the 2 articles every day consistently. That process of reading will bring the discipline. The process of reading will help you improve your vocabulary and language. The process of reading will help you to assimilate content and simplify the content. And more importantly, that process will make you aware of what is happening in your surrounding. The next and the most important question of all is how to go about reading the newspaper editorial or newspaper article. These are the 3 important steps that you should understand. When you complete reading a newspaper editorial or a newspaper article, first you should categorize the editorial. The second, you should retell the editorial. And third, you should write down the editorial. Okay, what do you mean by categorizing? Once you have read the entire editorial, you have to assess whether that editorial will fall under content category, factual category, or idea category. The next, what is retelling an editorial? Retelling an editorial means once you have read an editorial, try to think that you are retelling that editorial to someone else. That is, think that there is someone sitting in front of you and try to teach that person who is sitting in front of you in simple words what that editorial is talking about. Now, when you want to teach or when you want to retell, don't try to replicate all the information that is there in the editorial. Don't try to be a perfectionist. Even if the editorial is giving you 10 different points and if you are able to teach only 7 points, that is also completely fine. So don't be a perfectionist there. But what is very, very important is when you read the editorial, imaginatively or otherwise, please try to retell that editorial in your own words. When you retell the editorial in your own words, you are internalizing the editorial. So that is a very, very important step. So the first is categorization. I will teach you how to categorize by taking the illustration of different articles. Don't worry about it. The second is, after categorization comes internalization. How will you internalize? By retelling the editorial imaginatively to someone sitting in front of you in very simple words. This second step will help you to internalize and will help you to assimilate the content given in the newspaper. The third thing is you have to write down the editorial. You can write down the editorial in 2 formats. One, you can either write down the editorial in mind map format or you can write down the editorial in question and answer format. What is question and answer format? It means that you convert that entire editorial into a question and then you just answer that question by using all the information that is there in the editorial. It is similar to what newspaper capsule questions that I put every day in my Telegram channel. Okay, so these are the 3 important steps. When you read an editorial, first categorize the editorial, the second is internalize the editorial, and the third most important thing is write down the editorial. Now I am going to illustrate to you 3 different types of editorials: a content article, a factual article, as well as an idea article. I am going to show you how to take that, how to assess it, and then how to internalize it and how to make notes. So listen to this carefully and see and observe and follow the same thing when you start reading the newspaper diligently. Now, the first article that I am going to show you is from the Hindu newspaper and it is from the column of text and context. And the article reads as, what constitutes contempt of court in India? Now, after reading this article, I understood that there is so much of information in the article that I can write an entire answer from that. Because there is so much of information that I can write an entire answer, this particular article comes under the category of content article. So, what is content article? Content article means there is a lot of information in that content. It allows me to write an entire answer from that one article itself. Now look at this. Once I read the article, I am going to teach you what is my understanding of this article. After reading this article, assume that you are sitting in front of me and I am going to teach what exactly that article is trying to tell me. Now, I may not tell all the points that is there in the article. That is not the exercise. The exercise is whatever I can assimilate from reading that article, I am going to tell it to you. Now look at this. After reading the entire article, I understood contempt of court is required in order to protect the administration of justice in India. Contempt of court is recognized in the Constitution of India under Article 129 and 215. The third is contempt of court is enforced with the help of Contempt of Courts Act 1971. In Article 19 of 2 reasonable restrictions, they have mentioned contempt of court as also a valid reason for reasonable restrictions of Article 19. Now, there are several Supreme Court cases mentioned in this article, such as the first one is Anil Ratan Sarkar versus Iraq Ghosh 2002, where the Supreme Court has held that the contempt of court must be exercised cautiously and should be exercised only if there is clear violations. There is one more Supreme Court case that they have told called Ashwini Kumar Ghosh versus Arabinda Bose 1952, where the court has explicitly said that fair criticism of the court should not be considered as contempt of court. However, scandalizing the court is considered as contempt. Next is Shanmugan Lakshminarayan versus the High Court of Madras Court 2025. This happened in this year, where the Supreme Court has told that contempt of court is to protect the integrity of judiciary, is to protect the administration of justice, and not to protect the personal prestige of judges. Now see, this is what is the crux or the content that I have assimilated after reading this article. Now, because there is so much of content, I can write an entire answer from that. That is why I am categorizing this as content article. And this is the assimilation that I have done from this editorial or from this article. Now, after reading that editorial, when I teach it to someone in front of me or when I teach it to some imaginative person sitting in front of me, I am going to simplify that complex issue into a much simpler issue, and that will help me to comprehend the issue much better. And this is very, very important for you to internalize. And lastly comes to write the editorial. As you can see in the screen, after reading the editorial, I'm going to make a mind map, or I can write an answer. I can do either ways. I can either make a mind map of all the information that the editorial gives me, or I can write the answer itself from this particular editorial and keep it. So as I told you, 30 minutes to read the editorial and 10 minutes to write the editorial. That is the golden standard. You should not give more than that. 30 minutes to read the editorial, 10 minutes to write the editorials. So every day on an average, if you do 2 articles, that means 40 minutes per article. That means almost 1 hour 20 minutes per day. So every day, if you can do 2 articles, that is every day if you can spare 1 hour 20 minutes per day for reading 2 editorials or 2 articles, believe me, in 6 months, you would have covered 300 issues, and that will be your superpower, and hence you have to read it. Now coming back. So I hope you understood what is content article and how after reading the article, you should understand and categorize it as content article. You should make sure that you internalize that article by explaining it to an imaginary person. And third, you should make a mental map, or you should write an answer about that article. So these are the 3 things that you have to do. So if you do that, you have not only internalized that concept, you have also prepared notes on it, and you will be using the same mind map or the same answer to revise contempt of court. Look how easy it becomes for you to make notes, how easy it becomes for you to recall, revise and recollect. This is very important, and this will actually get you way ahead compared to all the other aspirants who will be dependent on magazines. The second article that I'm going to show you on the screen is why access to knowledge is crucial for innovation. Now this article, when you read this article, you will understand that this entire article is talking about one idea, and it is the idea of Joel Mokyr. Joel Mokyr is the current winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2025, along with Philippe Egoin and Peter Ovitt. Now that information is not important. When you read this editorial or when you read this article, you will understand what Joel Mokyr is trying to tell. What is he trying to tell is an idea. What is that idea? We always emphasize that a society's progress is always dependent on economic development. But what Joel Mokyr says is a societal progress is not only dependent on economic development, but it is dependent on the cultural outcome. Wherever a culture will allow free circulation of information, free access of information, and free sharing of information, that culture will automatically progress compared to a culture where there is exclusivity, where there is hierarchy, and where there is inequality. So overall, this is the idea of Joel Mokyr. He says that there are 2 types of knowledge. One, there is propositional knowledge. Another, there is prescriptive knowledge. Propositional knowledge is theoretical, trying to understand how things work. Prescriptive knowledge is practical, trying to apply how things work for our own benefit. So a society will always progress if there is an integration between propositional knowledge and prescriptive knowledge. And that integration of these 2 domains of knowledge will happen if you allow the knowledge to spread freely, to be shared freely, and to be circulated freely. And for that information to spread, circulate and share freely, cultural factors play a very, very important role, and this is the idea given by Joel Mokyr. So this is the idea article. Whenever an article is talking about 1 or 2 ideas, you can put it or categorize it under idea article. But when you read that article also, you should try to retell that article or teach that article to someone sitting in front of you or some imaginative person sitting in front of you so that you internalize that concept. And then take 10 minutes and write down that idea. So irrespective of which category that editorial or article will fall, two things are very common. One, you should internalize that article by teaching it to someone. And two, you should write down the important points in 10 minutes. It can be a mind map or it can be a question and answer. So this is a common thing that you have to do. Okay, so you have learned about content article, you have learned about the idea article. Now let us go into factual articles. The next article that you're going to see on the screen is written by C.K. Mishra, who was the ex-secretary of MOEFCC, who has written a very beautiful article that says, Indian forests hold the future. Now when you read this article, you will understand that there are a lot of facts that you can gather that you can use in other answers. So, on reading this article, I could gather the following information. The first fact that I can gather from this article is the forest and tree cover in India has increased from 24.16% in 2015 to 25.17% in 2023. The second fact is there is revised targets of Green India Mission. Now, the Green India Mission aims to restore 25 million hectares of non-forest and degraded land by 2030. By doing this, we are creating an additional carbon sink of almost 3.39 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. The third fact that I can gather from this article is that Indian forests are able to absorb almost 15% of annual carbon dioxide emissions from India, and thus forests are playing a very critical role in India achieving its nationally determined contributions under Paris Agreement. The fourth important aspect or fact that I can take is Campa funds are underutilized in India. Almost 90,000 crores are underutilized in Campa funds. For example, Delhi, only 23% of the Campa funds are utilized and the remaining are remaining idle. So these are the four important facts that I've got from this article. Along with these four important facts, they've also mentioned two cases that you can also use in the answers. For example, they talk about the successful model of Odisha's joint forest management, and they also talk about Chhattisgarh, where the abandoned cattle shelters were turned into plantations of mahua trees that has helped balance ecological conservation with tribal livelihood. Now see, you've got two case studies and four facts, and that is why I'm categorizing this under the category of factual article. But don't forget to internalize it by teaching it to someone, and then don't forget in 10 minutes you have to jot down all these facts in your answer paper. Okay guys, I hope the illustration was helpful, and I hope that that illustration has given you clarity of how to read the newspaper. Now, few things that are very important for you before you start reading newspaper, so please listen to this carefully. The first thing is, when you are reading newspapers, you will always face some type of resistance because there will always be one or two paragraphs that you will not be able to understand. That is okay. Don't sit in that paragraph thinking that you have to understand that paragraph to proceed. It is not necessary. If you're not able to understand that paragraph, skip that paragraph and go ahead. Don't get stuck anywhere. Don't have that perfectionist attitude. The second thing is you have to allot a limit for you to finish the article. Otherwise, it will take a lot of time, and that time limit is 30 minutes. You should not spend per article more than 30 minutes. 30 minutes to read, 10 minutes to write. That should be the norm. The third and very important thing is to internalize the article that you have read. What do you mean by internalizing? Internalizing means you're taking that article and converting it into your own words. That is, once you've read the article, you're going to teach the article or retell the article to someone imaginatively sitting in front of you. That will help you to simplify that article and assimilate the content better. The next is, after internalizing the content, make sure that you write down whatever you understood in a piece of paper. Don't again fall into the perfection trap of writing all the points in the article. Write down those points that you can understand and you have simplified and that is there in your mind. Even if it is 6 out of 10 points, that is also fine. But writing down those points is very important, so make sure that you write it down. Why writing down is very important is, when you write down the points for a particular issue, then that piece of paper becomes your notes for that particular issue. So take that paper and file it accordingly to which GS paper that issue will fall under. For example, if that issue that you have made notes is on contempt of court, then file it in GS2. If that issue is on earthquakes, then file it in GS3. So like this, when you take an article and when you have written the notes, don't throw that paper. That paper will act as your notes for that particular issue. So take that particular paper and file it accordingly to which GS paper that it falls under. So imagine this, every day if you just take 2 articles, if you just read them, internalize them and write notes on them and file it. In the matter of 6 months, you'll have more than 300 articles in your notes, which you can revise very quickly, which you already are aware of because you have assimilated that content and you already have a grip on all those issues. This is the benefit of reading newspapers consistently. The final and the golden rule to read the newspaper consistently for long periods of time is your attitude. Many people will have the attitude of expectation, and that expectation will create pressure to read newspapers. Let me explain what it is. When you're reading the newspaper, don't have the expectation that this will come in the exam, this will come in the exam, this will come in the exam, and then read the article. When you read that, instead of understanding and comprehending the article, you're only trying to memorize the article, and that adds the pressure, and that will create that animosity for you to not read the articles. So then what should be the attitude that will help us read the newspaper consistently? And that will be the attitude where you will read the newspaper just out of the love for it, just to become a learned individual, just to become more aware about what is happening around you. If you have that attitude to just learn something new every day, then you will be excited to read the newspaper every day, because there is something new that you will learn when you read the newspapers, and that will keep you going for a long period of time. So guys, tomorrow when you pick up the newspaper, don't pick up the newspaper with any expectation. Pick up the newspaper just out of curiosity, just for the love to learn. And when you do that, you'll start enjoying the newspaper as much as you enjoy all the fun activities that you do. I hope that this video has busted many myths about reading newspaper, and I hope that this video has given a clear path of how to read the newspapers. Thank you so much for all the love and support, guys. Please like, share and subscribe, and more importantly, share this video with as many people as possible, because those views will incentivize us to work harder and bring much better programs for all my students community. Thank you so much for the love and support. I'll see you again. Bye.